He had his gun, so he just swung it open.
I start to notice that, the atmosphere feels a little bit weird.
First thing he seen was this 6.5 foot tall, broad shoulder, dark hair. That freaked him out.
We hadn't talked to her about like life and death and what any of that means. She's 3 years old,
So we turned around. Suddenly there's a whole tree falling across the road.
And she was describing to us that, there was a deceased person that she could see visually.
You're listening to Cryptid Clues, where we tackle the ever-expanding history and mystery of monsters and supernatural madness every Monday. You can find us at CryptidClues.ca for more information, or even check out exclusive content and support us at patreon.com/CryptidClues. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Cryptid Clues. I'm your host, Reuben, joined by our other also host, Taylor. And today's topic is in response to the wildfires that we've had spreading throughout my home province of British Columbia. Just want to shout out to all of our hardworking firefighters and emergency responders that have been working around the clock to protect people's families and homes. If you're watching the video version of this on YouTube, we're going to share a quick photo in that feed there so you can see what's occurring. If you're listening to the audio version, you can always check out the video version on YouTube. Subscribe to us there as well. I will say we had a couple days of rain now, and the dense smoke has mostly pushed on. While the fires are still a very real threat, most of our cities under evac. Some evacs are being rescinded now.
It's just been absolutely crazy living here, and just with the fires, the smoke, like you said, it's just absolutely nuts. But I wanted to shout out my nephew here. He's a firefighter. And he's been working exceptionally hard to assist in the home protection from this ongoing fire that's not only in one location, but multiple locations in the Okanagan. When it first started, and you'll see in the photos how bad it is, that just spread across our lake, and it started to hit other parts of town. Basically, the embers and the cinders that were flowing up into the sky were just going everywhere, and people's roofs were going on fire. It's just nuts. But fires, though, they seem to become more common each summer. Granted, majority are caused by humans, but a fair share of them are caused by thunderstorms and lightning. It's when the electrical charges are separated. So whilst we may get rain on a very hot day, it also has an increased risk of causing severe damage. And when that damage occurs, it's usually the wildfire affected first and foremost.
The wildlife.
Wildlife. Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, he said wildfire. It's fire in the brain, though. I mean,
yeah, it really, really is.
Yeah, it's been absolutely nuts. Like just here in Vernon, like, so much smoke everywhere coming down from everywhere that's on fire. And even at my work, it's like coming into the building a little bit, blocking some of the signage. Now we have some nice air scrubbers. Oh, it's beautiful. It's pushed it out. We're nice and clean. It's smoke free around town right at the moment. I hope it stays that way.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I went and bought an air purifier. I mean, we were on the fence about getting one for a while, but we have a little daughter at home. So when the smoke got really bad, this would have been the following day after the night that I went and saw the fires and we took these photos. The smoke was contained in its one area, and then when I was out into town, I was working. The smoke within a half an hour just descended on the whole valley. And it was just so potent. The winds were unlike any winds I have seen here before. They were so powerful. And that night, I just remember constantly checking the phone. Like I went and got the air purifier. I was spraying the roof down of our house and just checking the phone constantly because power lines were getting caught on fire. People were being evacuated. I've never seen such a huge evacuation. There were talks of evacuating the whole city. There were talks of evacuating our hospital, and our hospital is huge. There were very serious protocols that were being possibly established in the event that this fire gets worse and worse and worse. Our whole city dump caught on fire, and it just got progressively more disastrous. So sleeping through the night was not really an option because you're just checking and you're thinking, man, at any point in time, are we going to get that evac order and are we going to have to pack up and go? It is. It's terrifying. And so I can't imagine the people that were evacuated under order and they did lose their homes. That's absolutely horrendous, and my heart pours out to them. And it's hard to ascertain information when you're in this situation. You're trying to see what's going on, because my sister was evacuated and we thought her house burned down and we couldn't get information on what was going on. So it's just tricky. But shout outs to a lot of the people in the community that are just creating these social media groups and just trying to alert everyone. That's definitely a very powerful tool. And I don't know if I put this in my notes, but not being able to rely on Canadian media because of a dilemma between our government and Facebook Meta right now, that doesn't help the situation. Both sides are to blame, in my opinion, but that's where I have huge shout outs to the community and people themselves coming together to really help everyone stay safe.
Yeah, even just my feeds and stuff right now, if I'm using like an app or whatever, I scroll through it, it's all just about our wildfires right nearby. It's people sharing, posting reels, talking about it, stuff like that. And now that we're mostly, I think we're through the worst of it. Like there's still stuff going on and it could get worse. I'm hoping it's over with the little bit of rain that we got. It's going to start rescinding more and more. But you were talking about some tools and stuff earlier, and yeah, those air purifiers, those are amazing. Not to bring this down from such a crazy topic of huge wildfires and all the stuff that's going on, but to the air purifiers, I have a small one and it's washable, all the filters and everything. So basically, like every day almost, you could pull it apart and just rinse it, wash out the smoke, because it's bad. And you can't get enough disposable filters to refill that thing with. So just being able to clean it has been such a godsend.
So does it run it through water, or it's just a filter that you wash with water?
Yeah, you just take it apart, you grab the filters. They're big, heavy things. And then there's like a foam filter that you can rinse out a few times before you have to replace it. And you just rinse it like in the shower with like a hard pressure, let it dry and put it back in.
That's really nice. Mine doesn't have that. Mine is just basically a padded filter that I have to dispose of. So I bought an extra pack just to be safe, because they were selling like hotcakes at the store. That's for dang sure.
Yeah. Oh, and the car filters too. I've been using the recycle. What do you call it when it uses the air that's in the cabin only?
Oh yes,
it's a little circulate
Recirculates.
button. Yeah, circulate button. So it cuts off the air from the outside. That too is my only way to drive to work without like gagging the whole way and getting a headache.
Yeah, no, it definitely goes a absolute long way. I mean, we were checking the air quality, and the image that it was saying on your air quality alert page, basically in the city, it was basically a guy wearing a full-on gas mask. It was labeled as hazardous. It was at a full 11 on the scale. 11's like the max. So you do not want to go outside. Everyone was wearing masks.
I think the standard for like clean, dirty, like it's breathable, it's okay air is like 30 is your typical average. Like not great, but it's not bad. And we went up to 220 or something like that.
Oh gosh, yeah, that sounds about right. Like you couldn't even see the mountains behind people's homes.
The render distance was so small, we had to update our graphics card.
Yeah, honestly.
But man, our hometown has never loaded quicker.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, moving on. We are going to be talking a little bit more about just kind of the history and some of the statistics behind wildfires, and then we're going to kind of let that segue into the connection with wildlife and Bigfoot and so forth. So I quote, based on data in the National Forestry Database, over 8,000 fires occur each year and burn an average of over 2.1 million hectares. Also, lightning causes about 50% of all fires, but accounts for about 85% of the annual area burned. Note that such statistics derived on the Canadian National Fire Database may differ due to incomplete data. What that means is some fires can go completely unnoticed, and some that stay under 200 hectares aren't included in that total count. This data is also starting from 1980 to 2021, and in case you are trying to envision what 1 hectare looks like, think of your average sports field and times that by 2.1 million. So 2.1 million football fields, basically.
Oh, that's a big football field.
That's a very big football field. Absolutely. Now, just like earthquakes and tsunamis, some animals have that sense developed well enough that they can flee without warning to avoid the danger. Humans aren't lucky enough to have this ability necessarily. And the same applies for forest fires with wildlife as well. Many larger and faster animals can either run or fly to the danger zone caused by the flames, or even seek refuge in water sources. It's the smaller wildlife that really can't flee over great distances that is more likely to retreat into logs or under rocks, hide in their burrows. So during these dangerous events, predators are absolutely known for taking advantage of the confusion and actually hunt smaller animals and prey that is trying to evade the danger. This includes forest fires. Lots of animals sometimes, and sadly, do get left behind as they can't keep up and escape from it. It's usually the slower moving species like porcupines, for example.
Not the porcupines.
I know. I hated seeing that, but that in my research, that's what kept getting notably mentioned was porcupines.
What's
So,
up with the porcupines?
I know.
Are they really that slow? They can't just ball up and like spin a little bit and then take off?
Oh,
Well, that's
yeah.
hedgehogs. That's hedgehogs.
That's
that do that.
hedgehogs.
Man.
Sonic speed.
They're too slow.
They're too slow. Yeah. Now, prominent cause of death: smoke inhalation. Oh my god, inhalation. What am I saying?
Predators eating them.
Oh my goodness. Yes, predators, oxygen deprivation, and just serious injury in general. Heat exhaustion and dehydration is also prominent occurrences of death. After wildfire destroys an area of land, the animals that do survive, that you've basically overcome your first tribulation, but you're subject to an even greater concern due to the loss of that habitat, food, water, and nesting sources all destroyed, and this impact can last for years. The burn landscape that remains after a wildfire usually creates a new type of habitat that replaces the forestry, and that would be with just shrubbery and grass. This is where places like old growth forest habitats have it the worst. Many species rely on those ancient places for their diets and shelter. And then you have competition, where wildlife that do survive from a destroyed area move into a new neighborhood, so to speak, and just fight over resources to survive. These new migrations can also be a cause for animals to wander into human populated areas that they would otherwise avoid.
There's been a lot of that, like deers and stuff in town.
Yes, absolutely. California and other Western states, including Canadian provinces, are particularly the most prone to wildfires. Our region's vegetation consists of pine needles, dry shrubs, and grasses, which are much more flammable than forests found in other parts of our countries, where, for example, maple and beech trees, which hold much more moisture, can be found. I also do think it's interesting because I've seen a few people talk about how some Canadian forests are basically built to burn, in the sense that, not that we're supposed to be going out and just lighting fires or by any means, but the way that we have a large plethora of pine trees and grasses and shrubbery,
Yeah.
it's just, wildfires happen. It is nature, and so they occur and they kind of pave the way for new growth at some point in time. But these burns that occur, these wildfires, are just happening at an accelerated rate because of more people going out there and not being too careful and taking care of their messes that they make and they leave in these natural places. So now Canada has over 362 million hectares of forest. This clocks in at around 40% of Canada's surface being forested areas. Our country holds 9% of the entire world's forests within our borders. That's a heckin' large percentage. And when you take into account 2.1 million hectares burning each year, if my math checks out, that's 172 years of forest fires to completely wipe out our country's forests. That's 2 generations, and it absolutely pains me to think about. What do you think about that?
Like 172 years of constant burning, or just
Yes.
172 years worth of forest fires?
If we lose, because they're saying around 2.1 million hectares burn each year, and if we lose that much every year, by the time we hit 362 million, it would just take 172 years.
Okay, so 172 more years of just forest fires occurring the way they are.
Yes.
That's a pretty harsh one.
You have deforestation, wildfires, much more contributing to reduced space, not only for most wildlife, but again in today's episode, particularly Bigfoot. So Bigfoot's ability and belief to traverse long distances, as thought so regarding their migration routes. Perhaps they have access to underground cave networks that'd be essential to survival. That's something I advocate for. But such an elusive cryptid this far, it's apparent it has a very good traveling method. We can also look at it maybe as simply phasing out into the quantum realm when danger approaches. There is the possibility of certain gateways and forests that create access points that go to other places in the world, like a portal. And we've mentioned before, though, that the downsizing of forests is going to result in more frequent sightings. Bigfoot already is a very common and openly discussed topic in today's society now, I dare say, and that's only going to increase as more and more people keep spreading into the forests and their habitat shrinks and the sightings increase.
Now, I was going to say, speaking of those sightings, we have a whole total of 3. And Taylor, I was going to say, why don't we leave the really long, good one until the end? And I'll cover the 2 short ones real quick.
Yeah, have at it.
All right. So when it comes to wildfires and Bigfoot, I have a couple of reports for us before Taylor gets to the best one. I have one from the ASO, that's the Alberta Sasquatch Foundation here, of a wildland firefighter reporting activity near his fire base. Now, it's all anonymous. This was reported by a firefighter. It's an official person, but the ASO was like, nah, we got to withhold this. It's by request, etc. So they do their research. They look into it to make sure things are fairly legit. And of course, they try to inspect as much as they can. Now, this was back in 2016. The time of the encounter was around the 6-month, around evening time. And this had happened just south of Fort McMurray at the Grayling Fire Base. I guess there's like an old fire camp there, and the forestry owns it. The fire crews are there in the summer, so anyone can try and just, if anyone wanted to try and go in, they would have a hard time. It's very hard for non-fire crews to access this base. So coming from a woodland firefighter in Alberta, he didn't get to see it like personally happen, but every year they put up with a lot of experiences at this fire base. And he's reported things such as, has been throwing sticks to mess at us from the bush. They make loud bangs on the cabins up at the fire base and harass the crew frequently. There was a footprint that was found by one of his coworkers as well, and they hear wood knocking on occasion. Now, this seems to be happening over multiple fire seasons, and it seems to be pretty much every year that he's there at the base. There's multiple occurrences. And he just felt like, hey, you know what? This keeps happening. I want people to know about it. I'm going to report it. And he went to the most official source he could find in Alberta to report a Bigfoot encounter like that. He just went, this is what's happening. Here's all the basics. And that's all I'm allowed to say. I think coming from a firefighter, I think that means a lot. It's a good report. And especially near a fire base, too, if there's other people witnessing this. There's a lot of good juice there. Now,
That's big. Oh, sorry.
No, you first.
I was just gonna say that's one of the biggest notions that I like to advocate for is you have that person or persons with you and they see this as well, and it just reaffirms what's going on. I think that's very powerful.
Mm-hmm. We've got another report here from 2004. Now, this was in July, around the end of the month, over in Oregon, in Josephine County, about 3 to 5 miles north of Cave Junction on Highway 99. Now, this was reported to the BFRO, and it was around 11:45 p.m. A buddy of this guy and him were driving, and they went down from Vancouver through Washington and up to Oregon, and they were lucky enough to witness this event occur as they were passing by a road that was actually closed for most of the day during their travel. It had just opened up by the time they got to it, as there had been some pretty sour biscuit fires. And as those were starting to die down, there was still like patches of fire, and you could actually drive right by these patches of fire, but they were just letting traffic through. Like, okay, it's under control. There's glowing patches. There's still some flames here and there, but it's all small, like this campfire fires at this point, right? So it's safe. Come up through here. So they're driving through, and as they're driving down the road, all of a sudden, something darts out in the road in front of them. They get gripped in fear. They're not exactly sure what's going on, but his buddy starts freaking out. Something deep inside of him saying, "Get out of here, like right now." And he floors the accelerator in an attempt to escape. But I guess what ends up happening is a 7-foot tall, 8-foot tall creature, taller than their 4x4, just decides to waltz across the road, covered in fur, hair, medium dark brown, walking away from the fires, and just kind of leaves. They go into some detail about it. Typical Bigfoot features, very thick, short neck, all that kind of stuff, the sloped head. And they notice, like, they go, wow, that's a Bigfoot, but they're too full of fear and they just take off. Now, I mean, the only relevance that this really has for this episode is that, hey, there's some fires nearby. But I can only imagine that, like, the Bigfoot's going to walk across the road in that kind of situation. It's walking away from the fire. It wants to just, it's going to get out of there casually. So that's what I have. And now we're going to go over to Taylor for the 1999 Battle Mountain Fire. This was actually one that I've talked about briefly in the past because it was a BFRO report. But Taylor's got a much more in-depth read on it here.
Yeah, and this was the first wildfire Bigfoot connected account that I have ever heard of, because you told me about it. You mentioned it to me many, many times, and I was always fascinated by it because it's just so surreal and very believable, in my opinion. But yes, as you said, 1999 Battle Mountain Fire. There were approximately 20 people that were in the immediate vicinity of this incident. They were all debriefed and informed in no uncertain terms that this incident was not to be discussed. There's not been a word about the incident at the BLM fire headquarters. Now, the witness is very concerned about keeping their job and discloses that they would look forward to not being in a lie detector test, and created an email specifically for addressing this incident. So they're very big on their privacy. I totally understand that. Now, reading it from the point of the interviewer, and I quote, "Although I had originally encouraged him to call me, this lengthy call was on him so he could maintain absolute privacy. He is reporting the incident because he believes the information should get out, and we agreed in any future communication to use the term patient to describe the Sasquatch. And I'll use it here. The incident happened in the early afternoon. About 20 firefighters were directly involved, and the injured patient apparently wandered within sight of the fire crew and was then surrounded. The patient seemed to know that he was captured because he soon gave up. It's mentioned several times that he just gave up. The patient sat down on his buttocks, giving no evidence of a will to resist, like when a dog gives up, and then you can do anything with it. The singed hair from the patient was laid out on the ground at first. His injuries were rather serious, including burns to the hands, feet, legs, and trunk. As well as much singed hair, it didn't take long for medical services to get to the scene. The attending medical team included the regular MD for the fire crews, a vet that they did not recognize, and one or more paramedics. The vet was taken aback at working on the creature. It was so human-like, and he reported to have allowed the physician to do most of the work. At some point, Demerol and morphine were administered, and the patient was placed on a spine board, which was too small. He was then placed on a regular ambulance stretcher, and sides were left down because part of the body hung over too far. The feet hung off at the end, and the patient was eventually removed from the scene in the back of a utility truck, not in an ambulance. They said that an ambulance would have alerted townsfolk and possibly news reporters thinking that a firefighter had been injured. No one would follow a nondescript van. The total time from initial sighting to extraction was estimated at 3 hours. No one knows where the patient was taken. No video cameras were on the scene to film any aspects of the incident. And the fire commander was present. He had a camera. He did record what he saw. Most of the body covered by brownish hair, about 2 inches in length. No gray hairs are evident. There are no mats noted on the coat. There is an odor about the patient. It is not an especially obnoxious odor. The witness calls it a natural odor. But he had a hard time describing it. He said it is similar to a strong equine odor. The head is not sloped. The forehead is a heavy boned. The lips large but human-like. The ears human-like and tight to the head, with the earlobe attached, not dangling. The patient is strong-jawed. He could not remember the color of the eyes, but thought they might be brown. The head is about 2 times the size of a human head. There is hair on the face, but not on the palms or soles of the feet. The hands are about 1.5 times a human hand. 5 fingers with opposable thumbs. The fingernails are thicker and heavier. One was chipped. The feet are large, 5 toes on each foot. No evidence of fractures, injuries, arthritis, or deformation. And the more intimate features are those of an uncircumcised male. Matching the human anatomy, sorry. The witness made the comment several times that these are not monkey or ape features. He felt he was in the presence of a very human creature. Yes.
That's
just
extremely
crazy.
interesting. That is such a fascinating encounter to me. And supposedly a lot of witnesses too, all sworn to secrecy because, of course they would be, right? Now, I wish we could know where it was taken. Do you think he was taken maybe to like a laboratory? Do you think he was taken to a hospital? Do you think he was taken to a government facility? Do you think they disposed of him and or studied him? What do you think, Taylor?
Oh gosh, what do I think? I tried to stay very neutral ground from what I was reading and digging into it, because I saw some people saying he was brought out to a specific university for studying, and just you get the whole run of the mill underground bunker, government facility, everything like that. What do I think? I feel like it's not government, but I feel like it is a under the radar agency that deals with these things, that probably snuck their vet on board this vehicle and was like, okay, let's just get him out of here and keep it hush hush. So I think it's easier to stay, just like with UFOs, UAPs, private agency, private corporation or entity over an actual government body itself.
I wonder how many of these private agencies are around then. Like, you can just summon them no matter where you are when something happens. Like, hey, over in Alberta, there is a Sasquatch. He's hurt. He needs help, medical attention. And then, bam, there's people there. How many of these agencies are there? Do you think they get flown over? Do you think they're just around? Do you think there's a lot of these places and we're just unaware of it?
I believe that people in these agencies are very well aware of the prominent reoccurring locations and the maneuverability and the migrationary routes of these creatures. So they probably station in select areas. I feel like that would be more efficient, knowing, okay, in the Pacific Northwest, these areas here are more probable to sightings, so we're going to station people there instead of just having one core team. Like, oh, okay, there's a place over in Alberta, we're going to fly them out there. Oh, then a place in Toronto, we're going to fly them out there next. So
Like
to
an
me,
XCOM thing.
Yeah, essentially, we could go down the rabbit hole, touching base back on human-caused fires and conspiracies all day. That is a whole other topic, but I will keep this limited to one thought I had the other day, where we had a mobile emergency task force roll through all the neighborhoods that were in the fire zone under evac orders. And this kind of touches upon what you were talking about with having like the agency and such. So now we also have videos surfacing everywhere of people trying to return to their homes or provide food or do something in their neighborhoods and their communities while the area is under evac order. The fire is certainly very, very far away, but law enforcement denies them entry into these areas. Now, after reading the book, oh my goodness, I wish I could remember it. De-Evolution, I believe it was Max Brooks, the author of World War Z. He wrote this book, and it's about a community that was isolated in the catastrophic event of a earthquake and a volcano eruption. And so these Bigfoot move out from the forest and kind of get focused on this area. And the area is just a small community, it's a little neighborhood. And so it made me think in regards to this. While that book is obviously just written for entertainment, you have these forest fires, you have it pushing animals out, and you want to get the community away. Would it be far-fetched if they are worried about cryptids like Bigfoot strolling into these more remote communities while under an evac order? So they conduct thorough checks, keep the area clear until these things are either eliminated or they move on out of the community. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a very interesting thought, actually, and it would make a lot of sense if that was the case. But also, how many people in the chain of command are going to be aware that that's what their orders are for? Because I know some of these videos that you're talking about, and there are some police officers not letting people through, and their only explanation is, hey, these are my orders, I'm following them. I don't know why.
Well, that's very true. And you're right. In some of those videos, they totally like, you're not supposed to go in. I'm not supposed to let anyone in. And then you have these mobile emergency task force units that roll in. They're totally self-sufficient, and they're absolutely praised because they go into these burnt areas under evac orders. They count the damage, they inspect, and they look for any signs that people are hurt or missing or anything like that. And it makes me wonder if you could just sugarcoat these agency teams that come through, and maybe they're looking for something else. Maybe they're trying to cover up, like, hey, okay, there's a Sasquatch here, let's get him out, or cover it up and make another story up in lieu of that. But I don't have any evidence to back such a claim. It is purely hypothetical, but I thought that it's a very fitting thing at the same time, because you don't have to give a cop a reason. You can just, like you said, just give him an order and he has to obey it. I mean, cops aren't going to be disobeying their orders. We've got pretty good, reliable cops here. So,
yeah, I'm not too sure how it works in the police force. Like, I feel like if you're a police officer and you're in an emergency situation like that, and someone comes up with a very believable human reason, hey, there's people there fighting the fire. I'm bringing food. I've got a van full of food and water for them. Well, at what point do you put your foot down? Do you know more about the orders than you're letting on to the person you're stopping? Because if you've just been told, oh, don't let people through, it's dangerous. But you go, oh, they're bringing food, they're bringing water. This is needed. This is really needed. I feel like that if that's all that you knew, you'd be tempted to let them through. And eventually you're going to break.
like human emotion just trumping over your orders, basically.
Yeah. Now, like in a military task force or something, like you're strict. Bam. Hey, if I break this order, that's it for me. But police force, oh, I didn't know how serious that order was. You told me not to let anyone through, but this was a van full of food and water. Like, I feel like you'd still be able to retain your job.
I like seeing like those. I was gonna say like a weak moment, but it's not even like a moment of weakness. It's just
A moment of human empathy.
Exactly. Thank you. That's exactly what I was trying to get at. And I think we definitely need more of that. In these situations, you have the best and the worst of people that is coming out. Take the Shuswap, for example, in that area experiencing a lot of heavy fires currently.
Mm-hmm.
The firefighting equipment has been getting stolen. And I'm thinking, okay, it's probably people with their own properties trying to defend it. I believe everyone has their own right to defend what's theirs and their property. And when you're dealing with a forest fire and trying to protect what you have, you can't be stealing equipment though from the people that are trying to fight these fires. I mean, you look in town here, most of the firefighters in town here lost their homes to the fire. But you know what they were doing? They were
defending other people's homes.
Exactly. They were making the sacrifice for the greater good. And like you got to pack up what you can. You got to get out everything that's important to you, those basic necessities and such. But trust in the fact that you can always rebuild and come back after the fact. And collectively, though, you got to work as a team. You got to work together. And it's not easy to say that in the moment. It's easy to say it than do it. Is what I mean.
Yeah.
So.
Well, those are all my thoughts, Taylor. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close out from this episode?
Well, with the shrinking of homes for Sasquatch and the terrain and the landscape and everything like that, do you think that they phase out into the quantum realm? Do you think they take these underground caverns? Like, what do you think they're going to ultimately do, I guess, with the fires getting worse and worse every year?
I mean, until a theory is proven, all of them are plausible.
Yeah.
And they're all wild, wild theories. I don't know. It's all a possibility. They could be phasing out. They could be walking away. They could be doing whatever. They could be flying up in UFOs and out of here. Are there Sasquatch there? Yeah, I believe firmly that there are. But what they're doing, I don't know.
Well said. That's all I got for my notes. So, you want to close us out?
For everyone listening to this week's episode, you can find us over at CryptidClues.ca. Feel free to subscribe to our Patreon for some exclusive ad-free content and early access to episodes over at patreon.com/CryptidClues. Shoot us an email if you have an encounter you'd like to report or anything you'd like to chat about with us about the show at CryptidClues@gmail.com. And finally, you can find us on almost all social media. We're everywhere.
So until next time, everyone, take care and stay safe.
Bye-bye.